Centre. For those who don't know, the VIC, Venezuela Information Centre, is the main national support body for Venezuela. We have local branches such as this in Birmingham, and of course we have a national structure as well. And I represent, my name's Doug Nichols by the way, I represent Unite the Union on the national executive of VIC. So it's very good to see so many people here this evening, and hopefully those who are not part of VIC and haven't had a look at the website yet will be encouraged to fill in one of the forms and get to know a bit more about the work of the organisation at some stage. Bart Jones. I noticed there's a book up in front of me and Bart's name's on it, so he's the author of a brand new book about Hugo Chavez. Now, Bart's an independent journalist. He currently does some work for a newspaper in New York, but he lived in Venezuela for an 8-year period up to 2000, and described himself as a sort of frontline witness to the rise of Chavez's power and the Chavistas. And he was thereafter involved with a Catholic mission that was some volunteers, including himself, living in barrios in Venezuela, helping there. And he was then resumed his career as a journalist in the Caracas bureau of the Associated Press, where I understand he was for 6 years. So he's got immense first-hand knowledge of the situation in Venezuela, and as I understand it, had a number of interviews directly with Chavez, which has helped him to inform this book, which he's described to me as a balanced view of the situation in Venezuela. So we very much look forward to your contribution, Bart.
I'm in my 3rd day of my tour of the UK. So I'm getting acclimated still. If you cannot understand my gringo English, John Green here will translate for you. Still getting used to some of these words you guys use. I learned today that a pound is also called a quid. Talking about quids, I thought it was a fish or something, a squid or an octopus. I didn't know what they were talking about. So anyway, so here I am, day 3. On day 2, last night, we were in Bristol. And some of the folks there were talking about the media coverage of Chavez here in the UK. And they were saying that in this newspaper called the Daily Mail, which maybe he's a little bit out there at times, I guess, when Chavez came to Venezuela, they had a picture of him on the front page, apparently, in a kind of a, fascist salute, with some kind of a funny... Yeah, that's the one. And so, this kind of reminded me of something that happened to me in the U.S. last year when my book on Chavez first came out. I was at a kind of a picnic, a barbecue, whatever you folks call it, in somebody's backyard on Long Island, New York. And this woman came up to me and she says, "Oh, you're Mr. Jones, right? You're the one that wrote the book about Chavez." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "I understand you interviewed Chavez for the book." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, that's right." Well, she got this alarmed look on her face, and she grabbed my arm, and she said, "Well, are you okay? Are you okay? Did they torture you?" And I said, "No, ma'am, they didn't torture me. I'm fine. I went down, I interviewed Chavez, and nothing happened." But, this encounter with this kind of typical American, because that's the way they all think about Chavez, basically, it really underscored for me the hysteria which has overtaken the debate about Hugo Chavez in the U.S., and apparently, as I'm learning more and more, here in the U.K. as well. He's been depicted as this kind of evil monster, the brutal dictator, one of the most hated men on earth. It seems like we have a Hitler down there in South America. So it seems like there's been a real kind of effort to demonize Chavez and to paint this, this amazing portrait of this evil man down there. I'm not a Chavez apologist. My book, I think, is very balanced. I don't make this guy into any kind of saint. He's got his flaws, I think, like any government leader does. But as a person who lived in the country for 8 years, covered Chavez, covered his rise to power, I'm really almost shocked by this image that has emerged of Chavez around the globe. Because let's look at some of the basic facts. What's happening in Venezuela under Chavez? You know, is he massacring people, first of all? You know, that's one sign of a brutal dictator, right? They massacre people. Well, no, he's not. He's not massacring people. Let's get that straight from square one, okay? He's not massacring people. Is he lining, you know, political opponents up against walls before firing squads, right? That's a typical thing we see with dictatorships. No, he's not doing that either, as a matter of fact. He's not lining them up against walls. You know, can people protest against Chavez? Well, yes, they can, actually. Hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets regularly to protest against Chavez, and nothing really happens to them. In fact, people even go on television in Venezuela and call for a coup against Chavez. Now, I don't know about the UK, if they called for a coup against the Prime Minister or a coup against the Queen, or I don't know how you system works over here. But if they did that in my country, you'd have the FBI and the CIA at your door within minutes if you were calling for a coup against President Bush, for instance. I said that at a meeting, by the way, in the US once, and some lady yelled out, "Good idea!" I said, "Ma'am, calm down. We don't want the FBI coming in here." But, you know, people go on TV and say that in Venezuela and nothing happens to them, okay? Do they have free elections in Venezuela? Well, as Doug mentioned, yeah, they've had so many, we can't even keep count of them. You know, 14, 11, 12, I don't even know how many. I think it's been about 11 or 12 since Chavez took over 10 years ago. And these are real elections. Let's not make any mistake about it. You know, people like Jimmy Carter have been down there and have certified these as free and fair elections. In fact, Chavez actually lost a big vote last year in December on a referendum that would have eliminated term limits. It would have allowed him to keep running for president. He lost the referendum. But what did he do? He accepted the results. So that kind of stuff doesn't exactly sound to me like a dictator, and certainly not a brutal dictator. Again, I want to stress, this is a balanced account of Chavez. He's not a saint. His government has some problems, like any government does. They have not done enough to fight crime. They have not done enough to fight corruption. It is too much of a one-man show centered around him. There is a bit of a personality cult. You know, they have some issues that you need to deal with. But they've also done some things very well, if we're going to be fair about it. They've got great health programs in the barrios, in the slums. Cuban doctors are living there and providing 24-hour-a-day medical care. That really is revolutionary in a place like Venezuela. They've had a literacy program where they've taught over 1 million illiterates to read and write. I've been in some of these classes. I've watched, you know, 70-year-old women learn to read and write. It's a pretty moving experience. So, you know, Chavez has done some things well. He's got other things he needs to improve on. But this image of the brutal dictator, you know, and the evil monster, I think is really overblown and is not realistic and it's not honest. And so I think the media, and you're talking to a guy who's part of the media in Venezuela covering Hugo Chavez. I know what these guys are doing because I watched them do it. They're being dishonest about it, I think. They're being unethical about it. They're not telling you both sides of the story. They're giving you a great version of what the opponents to Chavez think, but they're not telling you about what all of his supporters think. And they still actually make up the majority of the population. The problem is that they're a bunch of poor people. They don't have any voice, they don't have any power, they don't have any money. You know, they're not the guys who fly into Washington or into London and testify in front of Congress or Parliament about conditions in Venezuela. You know, those are the poor